She's ignoring you, and now you're trapped in your own mind, playing back every interaction like a scene from a movie. You're analyzing every word, every emoji, every pause between messages, wondering, what did I do wrong? Should you text her again? Say something clever? Maybe just wait it out? But let me stop you right there, because that frantic inner dialogue, that's exactly what she expects. That's what most men do. They panic. They react. They start reaching, hoping for a response that may never come. But not you, not this time. Because the truth is, when a woman pulls away, there's only one move that truly commands her attention. To know it's not begging, it's not chasing, and it's definitely not proving your worth to someone who's actively withholding their presence. The only move that matters is this: choosing dignity over desperation. In this video, I'll walk you step by step through the mindset shift and action plan that flips the script, not just on her behavior, but on your entire sense of self-worth. This isn't just about getting her to notice you again. It's about becoming the kind of man who doesn't need to be noticed to feel secure. The kind of man who doesn't chase after someone who's still trying to decide whether you're worth their time. So if you've been ghosted, ignored, left on read without warning, keep watching, because what you do next has the power to either validate her decision to walk away or make her completely reevaluate it. And here's where it begins. Don't panic. Pause. Breathe. Yes, that sudden coldness stings. The silence feels like rejection wrapped in confusion. But reacting out of emotion, it's not power. That's surrender. Breathe deeply, let the wave pass. Because the stoic man, the man who stands out, is the one who doesn't crumble in the face of emotional distance. He doesn't chase the noise. He embraces the space. That silence, it's not punishment. It's a doorway. And how you step through it defines everything. This is the moment most men crumble, right when she stops texting, when her replies turn cold, when the once vibrant energy starts to fizzle out. Your brain kicks into high gear, spinning endless scenarios. Did I say something wrong? She losing interest? Is she talking to someone else? Should I send another message before it's too late? That surge of anxiety doesn't take long to flood your system. And before you realize it, your fingers are typing something impulsive. A double text, a check-in, a joke to lighten the mood, a plea wrapped in casual words. But ask yourself honestly, would the man you strive to become respond like that? When a woman begins to ignore you, your reaction reveals far more than her silence ever could. And this is where Stoicism steps in, not as a cold detachment, but as a shield of clarity. A Stoic man doesn't fall to pieces when someone else changes their tone. He doesn't hand over his emotional stability to someone who hasn't earned that power. Instead, he observes, he breathes. He reminds himself of this truth. Just because someone else is confused about you doesn't mean you need to be. Don't need to scramble for explanations. You don't need to interpret her silence as a verdict on your worth. You need to stay rooted. Let's make this practical. Imagine she leaves your message unread. No reply. Minutes turn into hours. That uneasy feeling creeps in. But instead of panicking, you sit with it. You acknowledge the discomfort, but you don't act on it. You don't reach out just to soothe your anxiety. Instead, you redirect. You move, you train, you journal. Why? Because this moment isn't about her. It's about you. It's about proving to yourself that you no longer operate from fear. You don't need immediate reassurance to feel valuable. When you stay centered during emotional uncertainty, you show a rare kind of strength. She noticed not always immediately, but eventually. Because in a world full of men who react, you're the one who remains calm. In a sea of noise, your silence stands out. That's the power of Stoicism, not to suppress emotion, but to channel it into something higher. Resilience, self-respect, purpose. You become unforgettable not because you begged to stay in her life, but because you showed her with unwavering calm that your life goes on with or without her attention. Imagine this. She leaves your last message on read. That familiar sinking feeling hits. Your mind screams, say something, do something. Don't let her drift away. But instead of spiraling, you make a powerful choice. You step into calm. You breathe, you redirect your energy inward, not outward. You hit the gym, you dive into your work, you read something that sharpens your mind, you return to yourself, and that shift, that's everything. Because when a woman pulls away, your first instinct will often betray you. It wants quick reassurance. It wants control. But a man who understands his value, who lives by principle, not panic, knows that calmness in the face of confusion is a power move. Not because it's cold, but because it's secure, authentic, rare. You're not ignoring the sting. You're just choosing not to react from it. Instead of begging for breadcrumbs, you build a feast within. Stop asking, how do I get her attention? Start asking, how do I stay in alignment with my standards? Because that shift from external validation to internal grounding is where true power lives. Let's be real. The average man will double down on effort the moment she pulls away. He'll text more, joke more, try harder. But what does that teach her? That his sense of worth is tied to her interest. That she can control his energy by withholding hers. That she holds the power. But a stoic man breaks that cycle. He doesn't beg, he builds. He doesn't react, he refocuses. When her energy fades, he doesn't chase it. He replaces it with focus, purpose, movement. Not consciously realize this right away, but she will feel it. She'll feel the contrast between you and every other man who lost control when ignored. Your stillness speaks. Your restraint echoes louder than any paragraph you could have sent. And what's most attractive about that, it's real. It's not a tactic. It's not manipulation. It's discipline. It's the result of a man who values his peace more than her attention. So next time she pulls back, remember, you don't need to fill the silence. Let it speak for you. Let your absence raise the questions, your presence never forced. Let her feel what life is like without. Your energy constantly flowing toward her. Because when you no longer need to be noticed to feel worthy, that's when you become unforgettable. Here's where the storm brews inside your head. She's not replying. Every minute that ticks by feels like confirmation that something's wrong. You find yourself analyzing everything. Was it something you said? Did your last message sound too eager? Is she seeing someone else? The silence isn't just silence anymore. It becomes a story your mind is desperate to finish. But here's the truth. Not every pause in communication is a crisis. And even when it is, spiraling won't save you. A stoic man understands this. He recognizes the urge to make sense of the unknown, but he doesn't let that urge drive him into overthinking. Instead of obsessing over what she's thinking, he shifts the focus back to what he knows. His values, his peace, his composure. That doesn't mean he's naive. He sees the signs. He acknowledges the distance. But he doesn't create an emotional hurricane out of a passing cloud, because he knows that letting fear dictate his thoughts only leads to weakness. The Stoic path teaches that we must separate what is from what we fear it might mean. She hasn't replied? That's all you truly know. The rest is your imagination, and often your worst-case scenario bias. Let's face it, many men, when faced with a woman's silence, start reacting not to her actual behavior, but to the painful story they've invented around it. And in doing so, they lose control. They text impulsively. They search for reassurance. They break their own standards just to feel seen again. But you're learning a different way. You take that silence, and instead of letting it rattle you, you treat it as data. A woman who's truly invested in you won't need space to decide how she feels. But even if she does, your worth remains untouched. Your identity isn't built on her responses, it's built on your response to the moment. So when she goes quiet, don't fill in the gaps with fear. Fill them with focus. Train harder, work deeper, rest smarter. You don't chase someone who's uncertain. You build a life that makes certainty irrelevant. Sometimes, that very stillness is what pulls her back, not because you manipulated the moment, but because you mastered yourself. Let her silence say whatever it wants. Your peace will say more. Picture this. You've been texting a woman for weeks. The connection feels electric, words flow effortlessly. Laughter comes naturally, and everything seems aligned. Then, almost without warning, her responses begin to shrink. One-word replies. Hours between texts. She's online, but she's not replying to you. Your gut tightens. It's like watching a vibrant flame dim slowly into ash. What's your instinct? You want to fix it? You want to ask, is everything okay? You want to do something? But this is the exact moment that separates a grounded man from the rest. This is where you choose. Chase her energy or protect your own. Stoic man doesn't panic in the face of fading attention. He doesn't beg for clarity. He doesn't fight to restore a spark that someone else is willingly letting die. No, he observes. He takes a breath. Most importantly, he remembers his worth. Because if a woman truly values you, she won't make you guess where you stand. And if she does, if she slowly pulls away, offering no explanation, no effort, no respect, that's your cue not to chase but to recalibrate. It's not your job to reignite someone else's interest. It's your job to protect your peace and honor your time. Marcus Aurelius once said, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." Realize this, and you will find strength. Her silence, it's an outside event. Her emotional withdrawal, that's external. But how you respond, that's internal. That's where your true power lives. And here's what most men get wrong. They try harder when she's already giving less. They think if they just prove themselves, show more affection, or remind her of the connection, she'll come back. But all that effort teaches her something dangerous, that she can offer the bare minimum and still be chased. Not you. Not anymore. You won't be the man who begs to stay relevant. You'll be the man who walks with quiet certainty. Through actions, not anger. If you cannot meet me halfway, I won't carry this alone, because your energy is sacred. Your peace is priceless. And once you stop overextending for those who undervalue you, you become magnetic, not because you're cold, but because you're clear. Clarity is irresistible in a world full of confusion. Let's be clear. Not every silence needs to be shattered. When a woman begins to pull away, when the texts slow, the emojis fade, and the warmth turns cold, many men feel a rush of panic. They want to act fast, close the gap, fix what feels broken. But here's the paradox. The more you try to fix what isn't being reciprocated, the more you disconnect from your own dignity. So what do? You don't disappear. You don't ghost her in return. You don't punish her with silence. Instead, you pull back without falling away. You stop overgiving. You pause the chase. You protect your energy not because you're playing a game, but because you finally understand the value of your presence. A stoic man doesn't demand affection, doesn't fight for attention. He simply observes. He mirrors what he receives, not out of pride, but out of balance. She begins to offer less. He doesn't rush in to compensate. He pauses. He watches. And in that stillness, he remembers love that's one-sided isn't love at sacrifice. Think of it like a scale. If you keep stacking weight on your side while she removes hers, the imbalance will eventually collapse everything. Bling! Back isn't cold, it's clarity. You're not vanishing, you're rebalancing. This is the moment that defines the inner strength of a man. The moment you choose self-respect over confusion. Instead of trying to win her back, you win yourself. Back. You stop texting first. You stop checking in just to see if she still cares. You stop handing your peace to someone who's no longer showing up for you. And something powerful happens. The silence begins to echo louder than your words ever could. She starts to notice not your absence, but the shift in your presence. You're no longer orbiting her energy. You're standing still, calm, whole. This isn't punishment. It's preservation. It's the recognition that your effort should match hers, not exceeded, out of fear. So the next time she begins to drift, don't chase. Pull back, not away. Let her feel the difference between being pursued and being respected. Because when you stop giving everything to someone offering nothing, you don't become bitter. You become better, and that evolution, it speaks volumes without saying a word. Here's where the emotional fork in the road appears. She's pulled back fewer texts, colder energy, less engagement, and you're tempted to do what most men instinctively do, chase. You want to send that extra message. You want to say how it's show up, fix things, get the warmth back. But let's pause for a moment and think what happens when you double your effort while she has hers. You create imbalance. In that imbalance, something subtle but damaging occurs. She begins to realize she doesn't need to try anymore. You've taught her, without words, that you will carry the connection for both of you. You are not here to carry dead weight. You're not here to rescue a one-sided dynamic. This is the moment where you do something different, something powerful. You pull back, not as a game, not to create distance out of bitterness, but to restore equilibrium. You stop trying to spark conversation. You stop over-initiating. You become still, not because you're angry, but because you're aware. A stoic man moves with intent, doesn't give endlessly without return. He knows when to withdraw his energy not to punish her, but to protect himself. He understands that his love, attention, and presence are valuable and they must be met, not taken for granted. When you pull back, you allow something important to happen. She feels your absence. Not the kind of absence that disappears in silence, but the kind that radiates dignity. She realizes that the man who once pursued her now stands still, not because he stopped caring, but because he started caring about himself more. And maybe, just maybe, that absence becomes a mirror. It reflects what she's lost. It invites her to examine the gap. Because here's the truth. Women don't reflect when you're always available. They reflect when your presence once steady and strong steps into stillness. So don't explain your silence. Just stop feeding a dynamic that isn't feeding you. Pull back, not out of fear, but out of clarity. This isn't about being cold. It's about being conscious. You're not disappearing, you're making space. And in that space, two things can happen. She can meet you there, or she can drift further away. Either way, you remain grounded, unshaken, and full of quiet power. Picture this moment. You send her a message. Hours pass, then a day. No response, no explanation. The silence is loud and familiar. That anxious voice creeps in, whispering, maybe she didn't see it. Maybe she's just busy. Deep down, you already know the truth. She's pulling away. And right here, right now, is the moment that defines what kind of man you are. Do you panic and double down? You send another message, desperate for acknowledgement? Or do you sit still, anchored in your own worth hand? Choose not to chase. The average man scrambles for validation. He texts again. He checks her stories. He lets his day get hijacked by a response that never comes. But not anymore. You choose something higher. You choose self-respect. You ask yourself a powerful question. Is this woman matching my energy? Or am I carrying the entire connection on my back? And if the answer stinks, if you realize you've been the one doing all the reaching, the planning, the showing up, then it's time to stop. Not as a punishment, not as revenge, but as a return to balance. Because continuing to pour your energy into someone who's not even holding the cup, that's not love. That's self-abandonment. When you pause, when you stop feeding what feels one-sided, you don't go cold, you get clear. You create space. And in that space, you rediscover your center. She may or may not notice right away. That doesn't matter. What matters is that you notice. You feel the weight lift. You feel your focus return. You feel your value rise. Not because she confirmed it, but because you finally stopped discounting it. And here's the paradox. The moment you pull back with quiet confidence, that's often when she starts to feel the shift. She senses your absence not because you slammed the door, but because you gently closed it behind you. You didn't vanish. You didn't lash out. You simply stopped offering your energy where it wasn't being met. And that is a rare kind of strength, because a stoic man doesn't withdraw to manipulate. He withdraws to protect his peace. He doesn't react to fading interests with desperation. He responds with dignity. That silence you're hearing? It's not the end. It's the beginning of something better. The return to yourself. There comes a time when you have to stop giving to someone who's stopped showing up. That moment, though, painful, is also powerful. Because when you stop offering energy that isn't being returned, you reclaim something far more important than her attention, your self-respect. Let's make this clear. Pulling back doesn't mean becoming cold. It doesn't mean playing mind games or pretending you don't care. It means choosing not to abandon yourself in the name of connection. It means recognizing when a relationship has become one-sided and having the strength to let go of imbalance. A stoic man isn't heartless. He's deliberate. He knows that love, when real, is a two-way flow. And when that flow stops, when the giving becomes a monologue, he steps back. Not out of spite, but out of self-awareness. That space you create by stepping back, it's sacred. It gives you room to reflect, to realign, to rebuild. And ironically, it also gives her space to feel your absence, not as an attack, but as a wake-up call. Because here's the truth. When you're always available, always giving, always reaching, you become invisible. Your presence fades into the background. But when you pull back, when you stop over-delivering, you become visible again. Your silence becomes a signal. It says, I am not here to be taken for granted. When things start to shift, she may begin to wonder where your energy went. She may notice the change. But whether she responds or not isn't the point. The point is that you finally stop bleeding energy for someone who wasn't even holding the wound. You chose self-respect over chasing, stillness over struggle, presence over performance. This isn't about detachment, it's about discernment. It's about giving your best to someone who meets you halfway, not someone who disappears when it's inconvenient. So when the time comes, and it often does, be willing to stop trying. Not because you've given up on her, but because you've remembered yourself. Stoic man knows that walking away doesn't always mean quitting. Sometimes it's the highest form of love, for the peace he refuses to sacrifice. And that kind of strength, that's unforgettable. There's an art to matching energy without losing your center. When a woman becomes distant, when the frequency of her messages drops, when her warmth fades into cool indifference, it's tempting to overcompensate. You think if you just show her more love, more attention, more effort, she'll come back to you. Effort without reciprocity isn't romance, it's self-neglect. Stoic man doesn't match energy out of revenge. He doesn't pull back in bitterness. He mirrors with calm intention. He reflects, not reacts. And that is the difference between a man who plays games and a man who respects himself. So what does it really mean to mirror calmly? It means when she becomes less engaged, you don't chase harder. You don't try to prove your worth. Quietly adjust. You respond with presence, not pressure. And in that stillness, you communicate something powerful. I will not fight to stay where I'm no longer being welcomed. Let's be clear, this isn't about giving her a taste of her own medicine. It's about choosing your peace over confusion. She stops showing up. You don't panic. You pause. You stop texting first. You stop over-explaining. You stop trying to solve a mystery that isn't yours to solve. Because if she cares, she noticed. And if she doesn't, then you've just protected yourself from deeper disappointment. Imagine this. She used to send good morning messages. She used to engage deeply. Now her responses are cold, delayed, or absent altogether. In the past, maybe you'd overextend yourself to reignite that spark, but not anymore. Now, you reflect the energy with dignity. You hold the line. That kind of emotional discipline is rare. It's magnetic. It shows her hand, more importantly. It shows you that your self-respect isn't negotiable. You are willing to give, to love, to show up, but only where it's mutual, only where it's real. In a world of men who overcompensate for someone else's emotional withdrawal, be the one who stays grounded. Mirror with clarity, match with calm. And never let temporary silence make you forget your permanent value. Because a man who can stay centered while someone else drifts away, it's not weakness, that's mastery. Let's talk about the shift, the subtle, the almost invisible moment when her tone changes, when her presence dims. When the energy you once shared begins to feel ... off. It doesn't always happen with a big fight or a clear reason. Sometimes, it's just less enthusiasm in her voice, less warmth in her texts, less curiosity about your day. And that's when most men panic. They start overcompensating. They flood the silence with more words, more emojis, more effort. They think, if I can just do enough, maybe I can bring her back. But a stoic man chooses another path. He doesn't run toward fading energy, he pauses to assess the balance. When her behavior changes, you don't rush to explain it away or drown it in more attention. You don't immediately assume you're the problem, and you don't launch into fix-it mode. Instead, you watch. You listen, you measure. And from that place of emotional stillness, you make your move not from fear, but from clarity. Let's say she once messaged you throughout the day, shared her thoughts freely, made plans enthusiastically. But now, delayed replies, short answers, lack of effort. The old you might have bent over backward trying to reignite what's fading. But the grounded man you're becoming? He recognizes that love cannot be kept alive by one-sided effort. So what do? You mirror, but you don't collapse. You reduce your output, not with resentment, but with purpose. You don't post cryptic messages or try to make her jealous. You simply step back enough to reflect what you're receiving. And in that adjustment, you maintain your frame. She may notice, she may not. That's not the point. The point is, you stayed in alignment with your principles. You didn't betray your dignity to chase her validation. You stood firm, not in anger, but in self-respect. And ironically, that's what makes you memorable. Because most men crumble. They get emotional, they get loud. But you get calm. You remain centered. A woman might not know how to describe that energy, but she'll feel it. She'll feel the presence of a man who doesn't beg to be seen, who doesn't fight for space, but who simply lives with such quiet strength that his absence says more than any words ever could. There's something powerful about a man who can remain calm in the face of uncertainty. When she pulls away, when her responses shrink, her warmth fades, and her attention shifts elsewhere, most men scramble to fill the void. They flutter, inbox. They post for attention. They spiral emotionally. But you've chosen something better, stillness. Because when a woman begins to detach, it's not always about you. And even if it is, it doesn't define you. A stoic man doesn't need to prove his worth with frantic action. He proves it through consistency, restraint, and calm presence. So yes, mirror her energy. If she becomes distant, let your effort reflect that shift. But don't do it to punish her. Don't retreat with bitterness or passive aggression. Do it with quiet strength. Because when your self-worth isn't tied to her affection, you reclaim your power. That emotional discipline is what separates a grounded man from the masses. She may not immediately notice your silence, but over time, she'll feel the weight of what's missing. She'll feel the difference between a man who chased and a man who chose peace. That difference? It's unforgettable. Let's go deeper. When you stop reacting to every change in her mood, you stop giving away your peace. You no longer need closure to move forward. You no longer demand validation to feel whole. You become a man who is not shaken by silence, but sharpened by it. Because true strength isn't loud, it's not needy, it doesn't demand attention. It radiates from within. And here's the paradox. The more calmly you pull back, the more noticeable you become. In your absence, she begins to reflect. She sees the contrast between you and every man who crumbled when ignored. She starts to remember your consistency, your depth, your centeredness. And that memory, it lingers. You don't have to explain why you step back. You don't need to announce your value. It's the way you carry yourself makes it obvious. That's what Stoicism teaches us. Sexternal chaos can exist, but our internal state is always our responsibility. So when she withdraws, let her. And while she's figuring out her confusion, you'll be building your clarity. Remain calm, remain focused, and let your absence remind her of everything your presence once brought. This is the moment many men fail to recognize, the turning point when her silence is no longer a mystery to decode, but a message to accept. You've reached out, you've shown up, you've given space, and still her energy continues to fade. The temptation is strong. You want to fix it. You want to ask what went wrong. You want to win her back. But here's the truth. Sometimes walking away isn't weakness, it's wisdom. A stoic man doesn't beg for clarity from someone who is unwilling to communicate. He doesn't plead for connection with someone choosing distance. He doesn't lose himself while trying to hold on to someone else. Instead, he turns inward, not to retreat but to refocus. Because the moment she chooses silence, your role shifts. You are no longer a participant in a mutual exchange. You are now the only one trying, and that is where dignity steps in. You've stopped trying to convince her of your value. You stop trying to fix a relationship that is no longer reciprocal. You choose stillness. Not to hurt her, not to manipulate, but to honor your own boundaries. You stop reaching out. You stop over-explaining. You let go not with bitterness, but with clarity. That's real strength. Now that's emotional maturity. And here's the paradox. In that moment of surrender, you don't lose power. You reclaim it. You realize that your value was never tied to her response. That your worth isn't up for negotiation. That the man you're becoming is far more important than the attention you've been chasing. So what do you do with that energy? You build. You grow. You deepen. You double down on your mission, your focus, your peace. You surround yourself with people who pour into you, who see you, who reciprocate, because nothing is more magnetic than a man who walks away not out of anger, but out of alignment. Let her silence echo into the space you once filled. Let it remind her of the calm, centered presence that's no longer there. And let it remind you that you don't need to be chosen to choose yourself. When you stop trying to prove and simply start being, you become unforgettable. There's something incredibly powerful about the man who chooses progress over panic. When she grows distant, many men pause their lives. They sit and wait, checking their phones every hour, hoping for a message that never comes. They shrink, their world down to the size of a text bubble. But the Stoic man, he does something radical. He keeps building. He doesn't beg, doesn't chase, gets back to work. Because he understands that emotional pullbacks aren't signals to stop, they're signals to shift, and that shift is internal. Instead of focusing on what she's doing, he asks himself, what can I do right now that strengthens me? So when her attention fades, he doesn't spiral, he sharpens. He wakes up earlier, he trains harder, he goes deeper into his mission. Not to prove anything to her, but to prove everything to himself. Because her absence is not a reason to pause. His growth. In fact, it's fuel. Let her watch from a distance. Let her wonder what changed. Let her feel the contrast between the man who used to wait in, the man who now moves forward regardless. Because you weren't born to orbit her mood. You weren't. Designed to adjust your self-worth based on her attention span. You were built for something greater. For discipline. For vision. For mastery. And in the face of emotional uncertainty, those qualities shine brightest. Marcus Aurelius said you have power over your mind, not outside events. Her silence, outside event. Her distance, outside event. Your work ethic, your discipline. Your focus, that's all you. The man who can keep building while she's pulling away, that man becomes unforgettable. Not because he tried to impress her, but because he outgrew the version of himself who needed her in the first place. So ask yourself, what needs your attention today? What can you improve, refine, or create while she's deciding what she wants? The moment you answer that question with action, you win. You take your power back. You become the man who doesn't wait to be chosen because he already chose himself. And in the end, that's what makes all the difference. There's a quiet revolution that happens the moment you stop proving your worth and start remembering it. When a woman pulls away, the instinct to fix, to chase, to explain yourself is almost automatic. But the Stoic man doesn't operate from impulse. He doesn't beg for someone to return. He doesn't seek closure where none is offered. Instead, he shifts his energy not outward, but inward. This isn't about ignoring your emotions. It's about understanding them. Her distance stings, but it doesn't break you. Her silence is noticed, but it doesn't define you. What matters more is what you do with that emotional discomfort. So you take that energy and you pour it into yourself, not to show her anything, but to show yourself that you're still in control, still focused, still whole. You start waking up earlier, you hit the gym harder, you dive into your craft with deeper passion. You rediscover the man you were before you wrapped your identity around someone else's attention. And in that process, something powerful happens. You stop waiting to be chosen. You realize you already were. Her silence becomes background, noise. Your purpose takes center stage. And no, it's not always easy. There will be moments when the silence feels like a shout, when you want to reach out just for reassurance. But each time you choose discipline over desperation, you strengthen something unshakable inside you. This is the path of the Stoic man who responds with composure instead of chaos. He doesn't make a scene when someone walks away. He simply continues building a life so full, so rich with meaning, that their absence creates no void. And here's the irony. The moment you stop needing her attention, that's often when she starts seeking yours. Not because you manipulated the moment, but because you embodied peace. You radiated power. You don't win her back by reaching out. You don't win by being available again. You win by no longer needing to win. You become the man she can't. Forget not because you chased her, but because you didn't. You chose to rebuild your focus, to protect your peace, to honor your value. That's what makes you different. That's what makes you powerful. Every instinct in your body tells you to fix it. She's pulling away, going silent, acting cold, and you feel that growing tension in your chest. That anxious energy begging for action. Your fingers hover over your phone. Maybe one more message. One more voice note. One more attempt to remind her how real the connection was. But stop. Because this is not a moment that calls for action. It's a moment that calls for discipline. A stoic man resists the urge to fix what's not his to fix. He understands the difference between emotional leadership and emotional labor. He leads with clarity, not confusion. He protects his peace, rather than offering it up as collateral for someone else's attention. When she chooses silence, she's also choosing space. And your job is not to rush in and fill that space with desperate noise. Your job is to stay calm, to hold your ground. Not because you're trying to prove anything, but because you're grounded in something deeper than temporary emotions. So you don't send the long text. You don't ask her to explain. You don't try to force a connection that's already slipping. Instead, you breathe. You reflect. You let her silence speak and you listen to what it tells you about where you stand. That moment of restraint, that's power. The kind of power that doesn't come from dominance or games, but from inner strength, from emotional self-control, from a deep understanding that your peace is more valuable than any response you could chase. And ironically, when you stop chasing, that's when clarity comes. Because women aren't just watching your words, they're watching how you handle distance. They're watching whether you collapse when ignored or whether you rise. Let her watch you rise. Let her see the man who doesn't beg to be seen, who doesn't rush in to rescue something that isn't being nurtured on both sides, who doesn't crumble in the face of uncertainty, but calmly stands in it. Because the man who resists the fix-it impulse isn't cold, he's wise. Knows that true connection can't be forced, and that walking away from noise isn't giving up, it's choosing peace. And that choice is what makes him unforgettable. There's a silent kind of strength that emerges when you choose not to react. When she grows colder, stops replying, or vanishes into emotional distance, most men fall apart. They flood her phone with texts, try to win back her attention, or lash out in frustration. But the stoic man, he does none of that. Instead of chasing, he observes. Instead of reacting, he remains calm. He knows that silence isn't always an attack. It's often just a signal. It's a signal that she's unsure, that she's pulling back. Maybe she's testing his composure, consciously or not. And in that space of uncertainty, he doesn't fight for clarity, he embodies it. Because here's the truth. The man who can stay grounded in the middle of emotional turbulence, that man becomes unforgettable. So when she goes quiet, what do? You don't jump in to save the situation. You don't start typing novels to explain yourself. You don't fight to prove your value. You show your value by how you handle the silence. You carry on. You move forward. You stay committed to your routines, your health, your purpose. You don't use her absence as an excuse to fall apart. You use it as a mirror, and in that reflection, you ask yourself, am I giving my energy where it's being honored? If the answer is no, you adjust. It's not out of spite, but out of wisdom. You stop offering full effort to someone giving half. You stop handing your peace to someone who hasn't earned your vulnerability. And that shift, that's when your energy becomes rare. That's when your stillness begins to echo louder than any argument ever could. She may expect a reaction. She may expect a plea. But when she gets your composure instead, she's faced with something unfamiliar. A man who doesn't need chaos. To prove his care, even if she never returns, you still win. Because you didn't betray yourself trying to hold on to someone else. You chose presence over panic, restraint over reaction, dignity over desperation. That's what Stoicism looks like, in action, not detachment, but disciplined grace. And it's that energy, the quiet, composed kind, that leaves a lasting impression. There's a moment when you might not even realize that defines everything. It's the moment you choose not to react, not to chase, not to explain. It's the moment you let her silence speak canned, you let your stillness answer louder. A woman pulls away, the average man scrambles. He tries to fill the gap with words, gestures, second chances. But what if you didn't fill the gap? What if you let the space exist and let your calm be the message? Because here's the truth. Your silence isn't emptiness. It's presence. It's restraint. It's the rarest kind of power in a world addicted to noise. When you don't respond with desperation, you flip the dynamic. She begins to feel the difference, not because you yelled, not because you pleaded, but because you stood tall in the absence of validation. That emotional stability, it's rare. And it forces her to face something uncomfortable, the version of you she'd never expected, the man who won't beg to stay. So what happens next? She reflects. Maybe not right away. Maybe not out loud. But inside, the absence you've left begins to speak. It says, I will not argue for space in someone's life. I will not fight to be seen. I am whole weather. You choose me or not. Here's the twist. That kind of energy can't be ignored. When you remain composed, focused, and undisturbed, she begins to feel the shift. The man she thought she could figure out has evolved. He's no longer waiting. He's no longer asking. He's simply living better, stronger, fuller. That's why Stoicism matters, not because it makes you emotionless, but because it teaches you which emotions deserve your energy. It teaches you that peace is worth protecting even when your heart wants to make noise. So no, you don't chase. You don't explain your worth. You don't convince someone who isn't listening. You move forward not as a tactic, but as a truth. You live. You grow. You embody everything she thought she could replace until she realizes she can't. And by then, you've already moved beyond needing to be remembered. You become unforgettable not because of what you said, but because of how gracefully you let go.